Welcome back to 101 East. We're talking today about the extrajudicial killings of political activists and journalists in the Philippines. And in the studio with me, Philippines Congressman Teodoro Locsin and Melinda De Jesus from the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility. And from Manila, we're joined by Raul Gonzalez, who is the Philippines Secretary of Justice. Secretary Gonzalez, just before we went to the break, we heard from Melinda De Jesus about the individual cases of journalists being killed in the Philippines, and the numbers of them are so high that the committee, let me just put this to you, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists said in 2005 that the Philippines is the most murderous country in the world for journalists, behind Iraq, and Iraq is a war zone.
Since the 80s. That was since the 80s. And you should isolate those killings during martial law.
The journalists have been killed in the line of duty, you know, where it is work-related, is 32. The total number that we've been counting since 1986 is in line of duty is 63. There is a larger count where they don't classify whether it's been in line of duty or not. So we're not even counting, we're not counting martial law cases at all, because during the martial law we couldn't count. But
the problem, Secretary Gonzalez, is not necessarily in numbers, it's the fact that cases are so slow to come to court, and in fact there has been an entire industry of intimidation.
It is actually true. We have had two cases.
Because we have charged. The Malario killing was decided already, and the person is in jail.
But that's
we
only
have charged several mayors of journalist killings.
Melinda,
there's actually only two cases where there have been convictions.
Melinda, I'm afraid I have to agree with the Secretary of Justice. One is, I don't think journalists should be given a special category.
I agree with you.
They don't deserve to live any more than ordinary farmers.
I agree with you. It is not to
so let's get that straight. Yeah. To say that the freedom of speech in the Bill of Rights gives them a special right to live, no.
No, it's not. But they should be killed because
what they have to say does not necessarily mean that they should be marked out for murder either.
In fact,
of course.
And where they are murdered, surely the legal system should be there to bring those who do it to justice.
It's even worse than that. You shouldn't even use the word extrajudicial killing as if there was judicial killing. We are not allowed to kill criminals. We have abolished the death penalty. So this is a double enormity in the Philippines, that there are extrajudicial killings in a society that has already adopted the rule that no man can be killed for breaking any crime, for any criminal law.
And the point at issue also here is that where people are killed, the justice and the retribution are seen to be either slow or being poisoned by political machination.
Well, in the cases of the killing of social workers, the investigation is done by the same forces that killed, that are responsible for the killings.
So do you think it's a fair complaint? Because Secretary Gonzalez is clearly denying any suggestion that there is anything wrong going on. Do you think there is a case to be made that people are being summarily executed without actually being allowed to have the rule of law on their side?
Definitely, and the conclusion of the Mellor report is very clear. People are being killed, social workers are being killed, not of any particular note. Obviously, this is part of a plan to spread terror among the population. Two, it is not done in the heat of battle. It is done by cold-blooded assassinations. The pattern of killing is the same. And it is done by the military. That is the conclusion of the Mellor report, because General Palparan himself dismisses the notion that these are communist purges.
I actually think that the Secretary of Justice, if he says there has been a rule of law, we really are in deep trouble, because he should at least look at the weakness of the state in terms of upholding these cases, in terms of pursuing cases. There could be actually some special cases for all a special court could be established. And it could be much more easy to then pursue this thing.
In many cases, the Supreme Court has established special courts.
Well,
in many cases,
Secretary Gonzalez,
do not appear.
While we're speaking of the Supreme Court, then
a trial without witnesses.
The witnesses don't appear because there is such a low.
Let me interrupt both of you. Let me interrupt both of you, if I may.
Journalists being killed. There are many journalists who are killed not because of their profession, but because of the love triangles involved.
Secretary
Yeah,
Gonzalez, let me quote to
That's a
you while we're
smaller
talking
number.
about the Supreme Court. Let me quote to you the Supreme Court Chief Justice, Renato Puno, and he said in a speech only a short while ago, he basically accused the state of using security of the state to justify the diminution of human rights by allowing arrest without warrant, surveillance of suspects, interception and recording of communications, and the seizing of bank deposits, etc. He's saying that there is a problem, and this is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
United States people for the Guantanamo jail and the British for
we haven't got that option here. What I'm asking you
days.
is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court wrong in suggesting that there is a problem?
I think everybody will admit that there is a problem. We should not deny that.
How do you plan to address that problem?
I agree with Mr. Locsin when he says that there is no such thing as extrajudicial killings. As a matter of fact, the government insists that we should not call this extrajudicial killings. But
Raul, please, I'm not saying there are no extrajudicial killings. What I'm saying is that that category does not exist. But people are being killed. And in a society, remember, you and I were in Congress when we passed the repeal of the death penalty.
We call this, Teddy Boy, we call this as unexplained killings.
They're explained by the Mello Commission. I mean, this poor man has done a very good job. I know that the left has discredited him, but he has done a good job, and he has established that the killings are perpetrated by the military. Now, the question is, let's do something about it. Actually, that's all. Nobody's blaming the president.
Let me come to Melinda de Jesus.
I think we are doing something about this. As a matter of fact, this is a policy of the president to stop this unexplained killings.
Okay, let me stop you there. Secretary Gonzalez, let me stop you there for a moment, because I'd like to give Melinda de Jesus a chance to speak on this. And I'd like you to address the journalist issue once again, because we glossed over that. And Mr. Locsin said a moment ago that journalists don't deserve any more protection than anybody else, which as a statement of the law of the land may be true, but nonetheless, journalists do have a role to play in trying to redress some of these issues, and that involves them putting their head further above the parapet. Is there a situation where journalists perhaps deserve greater recognition in what they're doing in the Philippines?
Well, only because we recognize the journalist's role and the role of the press as critical in the functioning of Philippine democracy. If you did not have that kind of a free press, if you did not have, if you did not chill the environment in which journalists operate, we would have a stronger democracy. There would be greater knowledge of citizens about what is actually going on.
There have been criticisms, though, that the journalistic trade is itself being hampered by the fact there isn't really any real oversight. There are no standards being applied to some of the journalists operating.
It is not a perfect press, as no institution, clearly, not even the institutions of justice or government, are perfect in the Philippines, and they have so much more resources than those poor community newspapers that are out there trying to do their job. However, let me point out, there is this easy way of charging that the journalists are at fault, that it is because of a love triangle. We have a database that shows that these are the minority. These cases are minority, and we take them out. We look at the ones that have been killed in the line of duty, where there is no other motivation that can be established.
But let me ask you, you're saying that journalists don't deserve any special treatment, but do you believe that journalists are necessary to challenge the authority of the government, and that the journalistic code of holding power accountable for what it does is a vital function?
But I'm really uncomfortable when people single out journalists as deserving of extra protection. You have ordinary social workers. This is what I find frightening about what's happening in the killings that are being done by the military of ordinary social workers. They're not even imported people. What I see here is a pattern of terror in being implemented by certain elements in the armed forces. I don't like this. And I don't like to give a special category for journalists. Because if what I fear transpires, that this is a dry run for something really nasty down the road by the army, I can tell you the journalists will not say a word.
Okay.
Because when martial law was declared, the journalists said not a word.
I will have to give the final word. We're out of time. I have to give the final word to Secretary Gonzalez. And Secretary Gonzalez, I want to bring it back to where we began this conversation, and that is the accusation, and we've heard it again and again from a member of the Philippines Congress, from a high-ranking member of the journalistic community in the Philippines, and, as I say, from any number of sources. There is lawlessness in the Philippines, and as Mr. Locsin put it, it's portending to something nasty further down the line. Do you still think that there is no basis to these accusations?
I do not agree that there is lawlessness in the Philippines. There are some elements of lawlessness in some countrysides, especially in areas which are infiltrated by the New People's Army. For example, many mayors now have reported to us that they have stopped campaigning because they have to pay campaign tax. And if they do not pay campaign tax, they will not be allowed to campaign in their areas. And the people in these remote areas are told by the NPAs that they must vote for this kind of party list, otherwise something will happen to them.
All right, there we will have to leave it. I'm afraid we have run.
My language.
We have run out of time. That's all the time we do have time for in this edition of 101
Thank
East.
you very much.
My thanks to my guests, Congressman Teodoro Locsin, Melinda De Jesus, and Raul Gonzalez. And from all of us here in Kuala Lumpur, it's goodbye.